the sun rose quietly over Egypt, painting the Nile in golden light. Though the river glistened peacefully, the land was filled with sorrow. The Hebrew people, once honored in Joseph's time, had now become slaves under a cruel new Pharaoh. Fearful of their growing numbers, Pharaoh gave a terrible command. Every baby boy born to the Hebrews must be thrown into the Nile. Mothers wept. Fathers hid in silence. Homes trembled with grief. But among the people, one woman named Jochebed gave birth to a baby boy. His cries were soft, but his presence stirred something fierce and protective in her heart. She looked at her child and saw that he was beautiful not just in form, but in promise. For 3 months, Jochebed hid her son. She wrapped him in silence, in love, in prayer. But as the child grew stronger, his cries grew louder, and it became harder to keep him secret. So, with a mother's courage, she built a small basket of papyrus reeds and coated it with tar to make it float. She laid her baby inside, kissed his forehead, and placed the basket in the reeds along the edge of the Nile. His sister, Miriam, followed nearby, hiding in the tall grasses to watch. Would he be safe? Would the river carry him away? Or would Pharaoh's men find him? Not long after, footsteps approached. The daughter of Pharaoh had come down to bathe in the river, her attendants walking beside her. She noticed the basket among the reeds and sent one of her maids to retrieve it. When she opened the lid, the baby cried, her heart soft. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she whispered. Miriam stepped forward, her courage greater than her years. "Shall I find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" she asked. Pharaoh's daughter nodded, and Miriam ran home. Jochebed, the baby's own mother, returned cold, not to hide her child, but to care for him under the protection of Pharaoh's own daughter. "Take this baby and nurse him for me," she said, "and I will pay you." Jochebed held her child again, this time as a servant to the princess, but also as a mother in disguise. She named him Moses, which meant drawn out, because he was drawn from the water. As Moses grew older, he was taken to Pharaoh's palace. Raised as royalty, he wore fine robes and learned the language of Egypt. He walked among nobles and studied their wisdom, but something inside him always felt different. Though surrounded by power and luxury, he never forgot the woman who had nursed him, nor the stories she had whispered about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of his people. Moses watched the Hebrews labor. He saw the lash of the overseers, the weight of the bricks, and the sorrow in their eyes. Though he wore the clothes of a prince, his heart burned with unrest. One day, as a young man, he walked among the laborers and saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Something snapped. Looking both ways and seeing no one nearby, Moses struck the Egyptian and buried his body in the sand. The next day, he returned to the worksite and saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He tried to stop them, saying, "Why are you striking your fellow Hebrew?" But the man sneered, "Who made you ruler or judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Fear flooded Moses. The secret was out. When Pharaoh heard of it, his rage boiled. Moses fled. He left the palace behind, the gold, the privilege, the throne he might have claimed, and ran into the wilderness. He had gone from prince to fugitive, from royal son to a wanderer in the desert. But Moses was not lost. He was being prepared. The wilderness stretched wide and silent, a world of sand, stone, and wind. Moses had fled Egypt with only the clothes on his back and the weight of shame on his heart. He wandered far, far from the palace, far from the cries of his people, far from the shadow of Pharaoh's throne. In the land of Midian, Moses stopped. There, beside a well, he came upon a scene of injustice, not in the grand courts of kings, but in a quiet valley. 7 young women were trying to water their flocks, but shepherds arrived and drove them away. Moses stood and defended the women, driving off the aggressors and helping them draw water. The women returned to their father. Reuel also called Jethro, a priest of Midian, and told him of the stranger who had helped them. "Why did you leave the man there?" he asked. "Invite him to eat with us." And so Moses came to stay with Jethro's family. In time, he married one of the daughters Sipporah, settled into a quiet life. He became a shepherd, tending flocks in the hills and valleys, far from the noise of Egypt. Days turned to months, months to years. Moses was no longer a prince. He was no longer the young man who struck down an Egyptian in anger. He had grown older, slower, quieter, but the fire inside him, though buried, had not gone out. One day, as Moses led the flock to the far side of the wilderness, he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The air felt different there. The rocks held a silence that stirred the soul. And then Moses saw something strange in the distance. A bush. It was burning, but it was not consumed. The flames danced, but the branches remained green. The fire roared, but the leaves did not blacken. Moses blinked, stepped closer, and said to himself, "I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up." As he approached, a voice called from the heart of the flames, "Moses! Moses!" He stopped. His heart pounded. "Here I am," he answered. The voice was steady, full of power and peace. "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Moses slipped off his sandals, knees shaking, face lowering. "I am the God of your father," the voice said, "the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At that, Moses hid his face. He was afraid to look at God, but the voice continued, not as thunder, not as wrath, but as compassion. "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries. I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them, to bring them up out of Egypt to a good and spacious land." Moses listened, breath held. Then came the call. "So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." Moses froze. "Who am I?" he asked, "that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" He had once dreamed of justice. He had once believed in action. But now, years later, he felt small. God answered, "I will be with you." Moses still hesitated. "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say, 'The God of your fathers has sent me,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said, "I am who I am. Tell them I am has sent you." Then God gave Moses a promise. "They will listen to you, and I will stretch out my hand against Egypt. With mighty acts I will bring my people out." But Moses still doubted. "What if they don't believe me?" "What is that in your hand?" God asked. "A staff," Moses replied. God said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses did, and it became a snake. "Now reach out your hand and take it by the tail." He obeyed, and it became a staff again. Then God gave another sign. Moses' hand turned leprous and was healed. Still, Moses trembled. "I am slow of speech and tongue," he said. "Please send someone else." Then the Lord grew stern, but not cruel. "Your brother Aaron can speak well. He will go with you. I will help both of you speak, and I will teach you what to do." Moses bowed. The fire had spoken, and the shepherd of Midian would now become the voice of deliverance. Moses stood at the foot of Horeb, the fire of God's command burning in his heart. The staff in his hand, once used to guide sheep, now carried a different purpose. It had touched holy ground. It had become a tool of signs and wonders. With Aaron at his side and God's promise in his soul, Moses turned back toward Egypt, a land he had fled, the kingdom of Pharaoh. the place where his people still labored under the weight of cruelty. He had been gone for 40 years, but now he returned not as a prince, not as a fugitive, but as a messenger of the Most High. Before appearing before Pharaoh, Moses and Aaron went to the elders of Israel. The people had been slaves for generations. They had nearly forgotten the stories of deliverance, the songs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Hope was faint. But when Moses performed the signs, his staff turning into a serpent and back again, his hand turning leprous and healed the people listened. When he spoke the words of the Lord, they bowed their heads and worshipped. For the first time in a long time, they believed God had not forgotten them. Then came the moment that would shape history. Moses and Aaron entered Pharaoh's court. The air was heavy with incense and authority. Servants lined the marble halls. Columns rose like trees in a stone forest. Pharaoh, seated on his throne, wore gold and linen, his eyes sharp and unmoving. Moses stepped forward. His voice was steady. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh raised an eyebrow. "Who is the Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Moses and Aaron pleaded, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices, or he may strike us with plague or sword." But Pharaoh's heart was hard. He saw not messengers of God but troublemakers. "Why are you taking the people away from their work?" he barked. "Back to your labor." And then, in fury, Pharaoh made their burden heavier. He commanded his overseers, "No longer supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them gather their own straw, but still require them to make the same number of bricks as before. They are lazy. That's why they cry out, 'Let us go and sacrifice to our God.'" The people were crushed. They scattered across Egypt, searching for straw, exhausted and afraid. When they could not meet their quotas, they were beaten, and they turned on Moses. "May the Lord judge you," they said. "You have made us stink in Pharaoh's eyes. You have given him a sword to kill us." Moses was shaken. He cried out to God, "O Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Why did you send me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought nothing but misery, and you have not rescued your people at all." But God answered with strength and promise. "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I have heard the groaning of my people. I have remembered my covenant." God declared, "I will free you from slavery. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God." Moses delivered God's words to the Israelites, but their hearts were broken. Their suffering clouded their faith. Still, God's plan moved forward. He told Moses to go back to Pharaoh again, but Moses hesitated. "If the people of Israel will not listen to me, why would Pharaoh?" But God was not deterred. "I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. Speak everything I command you. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, but I will multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt. Then Egypt will know that I am the Lord." Moses and Aaron obeyed. The time of patience had passed. Now came the time of miracles, and the mighty hand of God was just beginning to move. Moses and Aaron stood once again in the throne room of Pharaoh. The marble pillars gleamed. Scribes and guards watched in silence. But Moses had changed. He no longer stood in fear. He stood in obedience. At God's command, Aaron stepped forward, holding the shepherd's staff. "The Lord, the God of the Hebrews," Moses declared, "has sent us to save. Let his people go, that they may worship him in the wilderness. But you have not listened." Pharaoh leaned forward, skeptical. "Show me a miracle," he said. Aaron threw the staff to the floor. It struck the stone and became a writhing serpent. Gasps echoed through the room. But Pharaoh waved his hand. "Bring my magicians." His sorcerers came and, through their enchantments, threw down their own staffs, which also turned into snakes. The court murmured, but Aaron's serpent struck suddenly, devouring the others, one by one. Still, Pharaoh's heart did not yield. He turned coldly away. "Take them out of my sight." God sent Moses back again. "This time," the Lord said, "Pharaoh's heart is unyielding. In the morning, go to him as he walks by the Nile. Take your staff and say to him, 'The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me. Let my people go.' But since you have not listened, this is what the Lord says. 'By this you will know I am the Lord.'" Moses and Aaron obeyed. They met Pharaoh by the river, and, before his eyes, Aaron struck the Nile with his staff. The water turned to blood. Fish floated to the surface, dead. The river stank. The water in pots, wells, and pitchers all turned red as blood. For 7 days, Egypt suffered. Still, Pharaoh hardened his heart. God sent another plague. Aaron stretched his staff over the streams, and frogs burst forth, crawling into homes, beds, ovens, and bowls. The croaking was endless. Pharaoh summoned Moses. "Pray to your God to remove the frogs," he pleaded, "and I will let your people go." Moses prayed. The frogs died. But when the relief came, Pharaoh changed his mind. Then came gnats. Aaron struck the dust with his staff, and tiny insects rose from the ground, swarming every person and animal. The magicians tried to copy it but could not. They turned to Pharaoh and whispered, "This is the finger of God." Still, he refused. After gnats came flies. Swarms filled the land, but not Goshen, where the Israelites lived. There, the air was clean. In Pharaoh's palace, they buzzed and crawled on every surface. He summoned Moses again. "You may sacrifice to your God, but do it here in Egypt." Moses refused. "We must go into the wilderness, as the Lord commanded." Pharaoh relented. "Barely go, but do not go too far. And pray for me." Moses prayed. The flies vanished. But again, Pharaoh's heart grew hard. Next came disease. A plague fell on Egypt's livestock. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats collapsed in the fields. But in Goshen not one animal died. Pharaoh sent men to check. It was true. Still, he would not yield. Then came boils. Moses took soot from a furnace and tossed it into the air. It became fine dust, and painful sores broke out on Egyptians and their animals. Even the magicians could not stand before Moses, covered in boils. But Pharaoh's heart remained like stone. Then came hail. Moses raised his staff, and thunder rolled. Hail fell across the land, shattering trees, smashing crops, killing animals and people caught outside. Fire flashed in the storm. Only in Goshen was there peace. Pharaoh called again. "I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous. Pray for me, and I will let you go." Moses prayed. The hail stopped, but Pharaoh hardened his heart again. Then came locusts. Waves of them blackened the sky, devouring every green thing the hail had not destroyed. The land groaned. Pharaoh begged again. "I have sinned against your God. Please forgive me just this once." Moses prayed. A strong wind blew the locusts into the Red Sea. Still, Pharaoh would not listen. Then came darkness. For 3 days, Egypt was blind. A thick, choking shadow covered the land. No one could see. No one moved. But in Goshen, there was light. Pharaoh called Moses again. Go worship your God. Take your children, but your flocks must stay. Moses said no. Pharaoh's face darkened. Leave me. If I see you again, you will die. Moses replied calmly, You are right. I will not see your face again. But one final plague remained, a blow so deep that no household in Egypt would escape it. And this time, Pharaoh would not only let them go, he would drive them out. The air in Egypt had grown still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. In the shadow of 9 plagues, the land had suffered sorely blood, frogs, gnats, flies, sickness, boils, hail, locusts, and darkness, but Pharaoh's heart remained like iron. Moses had not seen the inside of Pharaoh's palace since the last time he turned away in fury, but God was not finished. One final word would be spoken. One final plague would fall. The Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. After that, he will let you go. Indeed, he will drive you out completely. Speak to the people and tell them to ask their Egyptian neighbors for silver and gold. The Egyptians, now terrified of the God of the Hebrews, gave freely. They had seen the destruction. They had heard the cries. They feared what would come next. Moses then went before Pharaoh one last time, not to plead, but to proclaim, This is what the Lord says. About midnight, I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn of the slave girl, and even the firstborn of the cattle. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt's, worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. But among the Israelites, not even a dog will bark. Then Moses, eyes fierce and voice unshaken, left Pharaoh's presence in anger. Pharaoh had been warned. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron again. This time not of plagues, but of preparation. This month shall be for you the beginning of months. Tell every household, on the 10th day, each family must take a lamb without blemish, a male, 1 year old. Keep it until the 14th day, then slaughter it at twilight. Take some of its blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of your houses. Then came the sacred command. That same night they are to eat the lamb, roasted over fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not leave any of it until morning. And the warning, on that night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn. I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt, but the blood will be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. It would be called the Passover, a night to remember for all generations. The Israelites did exactly as they were commanded. Every household prepared their lamb. They painted the doorposts with its blood. They stayed inside, and they waited. That night, the moon hung silently in the sky. And then the cries began. At midnight, the Lord moved through Egypt. In every home that bore no blood on its doorposts, the firstborn died. The firstborn of Pharaoh, the firstborn of the poor, the firstborn of the cattle. No family was untouched. Wailing rose like a flood in the dark. Mothers clutched empty arms. Fathers fell to their knees. There was death in every house, except in the homes marked by the blood of the Lamb. There was peace. Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron. While it was still night, he could not stand against God any longer. Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds and go, and bless me also. The Egyptians, too, urged the people to leave quickly. If you stay, we will all die, they cried. The Israelites packed their belongings, their dough, still without yeast, was wrapped in cloth. Their neighbors gave them gold and silver, and just as God had promised, they walked out of Egypt not as slaves, but as a free people. 600,000 men, plus women and children, marched out that night. They had lived in Egypt for 430 years, but on that night, with the moon still watching overhead and the scent of lamb in the air, a nation was born. Moses led them with staff in hand, Aaron beside him, and the people of Israel behind. As they walked, they sang with quiet hearts. The Lord has passed over us. He has delivered us. He has remembered his promise. But their journey was far from over. Ahead lay deserts, seas, and armies, and Pharaoh, though bowed in grief, was not yet done with them. The night of their escape had passed, but the Israelites still moved with urgency. Morning light washed over the desert as a sea of people marched out of Egypt, and old, strong, and weak, men, women, and children all following Moses, the man once exiled, now their deliverer. They were no longer slaves, but they were not yet free. God led them not by the main road, which would have taken them straight into the land of the Philistines, but through the wilderness toward the Red Sea. He knew they were not ready for war. Their hearts were still tender, like a child just learning to walk. So he guided them with grace. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud, shielding them from the desert sun. By night, he was a pillar of fire, lighting their path with holy flame. Wherever the pillar moved, they followed. It was not just a sin, it was the very presence of God. They camped by the sea, near a place called Pi-Hahiroth, between the sea and the desert mountains. But back in Egypt, grief had turned to rage. Pharaoh's heart, still hardened, flared once more. "What have we done?" he shouted. "We have let the Israelites go and lost their labor." He ordered his chariots, prepared 600 of his finest, and all the horsemen and troops of Egypt. The ground thundered beneath them as Pharaoh's army raced across the sand, the gold on their chariots flashing in the sun. The Israelites looked up and saw dust rising in the distance. Then the glint of armor, horses, chariots, swords. Terror swept through the camp. "Why did you bring us here to die in the desert?" They cried out to Moses. "Were there not enough graves in Egypt? What have you done to us?" Moses stood tall, wind whipping his robes, his voice calm, even as fear swirled. "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still." Behind them, the army of Egypt. Before them, the Red Sea. And then God spoke again. "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move forward. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so the people can go through on dry ground." And so Moses did. Then something incredible happened. The pillar of cloud moved from the front of the Israelites to the rear, standing between them and the Egyptian army. Darkness fell upon Pharaoh's troops, but light remained with the people of Israel. Moses lifted his staff. A mighty wind began to blow from the east. It howled through the night, sweeping across the water, and the sea obeyed. The waters parted. Towering walls of water rose on the left and right, and a path of dry ground stretched through the heart of the sea. The people stared in awe. Then, one by one, they began to move, stepping into the impossible. Children clung to their mothers, old men leaned on staffs, shepherds led sheep, merchants pulled carts. They walked not on mud but on dry ground, with the deep sea held back by the breath of God. Behind them, Pharaoh saw the miracle, but his pride did not yield. He ordered his chariots to follow, and they did. The Israelites had just reached the far shore when the first of the Egyptian soldiers entered the sea path. Then Moses raised his staff once more. The wind stopped, the walls of water collapsed, chariots vanished, horses screamed, soldiers sank, the sea roared shut, and the might of Egypt was buried beneath the waves. Not one of Pharaoh's army remained. When the Israelites saw the bodies of the soldiers washing up on the shore, they stood in silence. Then a sound rose not of fear, but of joy. Miriam, the sister of Moses, took a tambourine in her hand, and the women followed her, dancing and singing. Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and rider he has hurled into the sea. Freedom had come not by sword, but by the hand of God. But the journey was not over. The wilderness lay ahead, vast and dry, and the hearts of the people would be tested again. The waters of the Red Sea had closed behind them, and the Israelites stood in freedom, no longer bound by Egypt's chains. They now walked under open skies, with God as their guide. The wind of deliverance still echoed in their ears, and the songs of Miriam lingered on their lips. But the wilderness was vast, and freedom came with its own trials. 3 days passed. The people walked through the desert of Shur, their feet weary, their throats dry. Not a single stream or spring was found. On the 3rd day, they came upon water at a place called Meribah. When they tasted it, they spat it out. It was bitter. Angry voices rose again. "What are we to drink?" the people demanded. Moses turned to God. The Lord showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it into the water. The water became sweet. There, in that dry place, God gave his people more than water. He gave them a promise. "If you listen carefully to my voice and do what is right in my eyes, I will not bring on you the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Soon after, they came to Elim, an oasis with 12 springs and 70 palm trees. There they rested in the shade, drank deeply, and gathered strength. But their journey soon continued into deeper desert. A month had passed since their escape from Egypt. Now, in the wilderness of sin, hunger gripped the people. Their supplies had run low. The bread they had brought from Egypt was gone, and once again, fear turned to complaint. "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt," they cried. "There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Moses sighed. He had heard this before. But the Lord did not rebuke them in anger. He answered with mercy, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. Each day, the people are to gather enough for that day. On the 6th day, they must gather twice as much, because the 7th is a Sabbath of rest." That evening, quail flew in and settled over the camp plump birds that the people caught and roasted, and the next morning, something new appeared. When the dew lifted, a fine, flake-like substance covered the ground white like frost, delicate as snow. The people stared. "What is it?" they asked. Moses answered, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." They called it manna, which means, "What is it?" Each person gathered as much as they needed, an omer, for every man, woman, and child. Those who gathered little had enough. Those who gathered much had nothing left over. But Moses warned, "Do not keep any of it until morning." Some disobeyed. They hid extra in jars, but by sunrise, it was full of maggots and smelled foul. Moses was angry. Still, each morning, the manna returned, and on the 6th day, the people gathered twice as much. To their amazement, the extra portion did not spoil. God had provided daily, faithfully. The Lord also told Moses to keep a jar of manna as a reminder for future generations. "Place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations," he said. So Moses instructed Aaron to put an omer of manna in a jar and place it before the Ark of the Covenant when it would be built. But their tests continued. Soon, they came to a place with no water. Once again, the people quarreled with Moses. "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." God responded with calm authority. "Walk ahead of the people. Take the staff you used to strike the Nile. I will stand before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out for the people to drink." Moses obeyed. He struck the rock, and water gushed out, enough for all. The place was named Massah and Meribah, because the people tested the Lord and quarreled with him, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Yet even in their doubt, God continued to lead. He gave water from stone. He gave bread from heaven. And in every trial, he taught them that freedom was not just a destination, it was a journey of faith. The journey through the wilderness had been long and filled with trials. Yet with every step, the Israelites saw the faithfulness of the Lord. Cloud by day, fire by night, water from stone, and bread from heaven. Still, they had much to learn. And now, they came to the foot of the mountain where God had first called Moses. Mount Sinai. Its peak reached high into the sky, bare and windswept, surrounded by thick clouds. The air around it was different charged, holy. They set up camp at the base of the mountain. Then God spoke to Moses again. "Tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt. You saw how I carried you on eagles' wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my treasured possession among all nations. You will be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation." Moses climbed the mountain, stones shifting beneath his feet, until he stood in the presence of the Lord. There, amid the clouds and silence, he received instructions. "Tell the people to consecrate themselves today and tomorrow. Wash their clothes. On the third day, I will come down upon the mountain in the sight of all." And so Moses descended and gave the people God's command. They washed, they waited, they wondered what would come next. On the morning of the third day, the earth shook. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flashed from the heavens. A thick cloud descended upon the mountain, and a loud trumpet blast pierced the air. The people trembled. Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke. Because the Lord had descended on it in fire, the smoke billowed upward like from a furnace, and the mountain shook violently. Then God called Moses. He went up again, alone. At the top, amid the fire and cloud, God spoke not only to Moses but to all the people below. His voice thundered, and the people heard the first words of the covenant. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." Then came the 10 Commandments, a law, not just written on stone, but meant to be written on their hearts. "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. You shall not covet." The people, overwhelmed by the sound and glory, begged Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us directly, or we will die." Moses assured them, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of him will be with you, and keep you from sinning." Then Moses entered the cloud alone, ascending higher into the presence of God. On the mountain, he remained for 40 days and 40 nights. He fasted, he listened, he received the full law and commandments, inscribed by the very finger of God on tablets of stone. God also gave him instructions for building the tabernacle, a place where his presence would dwell among the people. He spoke of priests, offerings, and holy things, every detail, a sign of his holiness and desire to dwell with his people. But even as Moses received the law, the people below grew restless, and what came next would test everything they had just been given. Yet in this moment, this holy burning moment on the mountain, God revealed who he truly was, a deliverer, a faithful God, slow to anger, rich in love, and full of power. He had brought a people out of slavery, not just to free them, but to form them. And Moses, once a baby drawn from the Nile, once a prince of Egypt, once a shepherd in the wilderness, was now the chosen prophet of the living God. He would carry stone tablets in his hands and a nation on his shoulders.